What if the biggest thief in the room isn't hiding? Yep, they ride with us, talk with us, and sometimes even dine with us.
We are talking about corruption, so sit tight because in the next 26 minutes, we promise you that this isn't just your usual corruption banter. The solution to this menace is something you have been doing. So Fatu, every time we talk about corruption, it's always, problem. And, sometimes in Kenya, when I was growing up in school, we always talked about toa kitu kidogo, which is a Swahili term. Do you know what this means?
I don't know. Tell me about it.
So it means give something small, especially when it comes to the police. Police extortion is a very big thing in Kenya. For example, there's times when there's roads in Africa or even in Kenya that are very, very notorious that have people and police there who want bribes.
Yeah.
And this is completely frustrating, especially to Kenyans themselves.
I mean, when you talk about police corruption, it is the most obvious because it is right there. You can see it. And when you are gauging where corruption is mostly prevalent, it's usually with the police.
Absolutely.
In the police sector, there is a huge problem. Whether you are the one in the passenger seat, whether you are the one in the driving seat, it is there because they are not even hiding it. Which is why I think we should even take a look at what we have here because we have proof of this in this DRC video. Just take a look at this. Just take a look.
The citizens are a source of income for the police. This ignition key works now, but it's not the same, all because of the actions of the police. If they take your ignition key, you have to know how to negotiate. If you negotiate well, you may save some time, but you will lose money.
I mean, imagine taking a driver's ignition key. That is a crime. As a police officer, you cannot be doing that. So you're not only extorting money from people, but you're also abusing your uniform.
Exactly. And in Africa, especially in Kenya, because I come from there, there's roads that are particularly notorious, that make you angry, that you can't even use those roads because police are known to extort people, especially even sometimes when, for example, somebody is driving, right? And they have an unroadworthy vehicle. Yeah. Chances are that vehicle would be allowed to pass through that road simply because they gave something small, which is kitu kidogo.
It's crazy. I mean, the whole police issue. When I look at the situation in the Gambia right now, we've established an anti-corruption commission after years of struggling for this. But right now, a police prosecutor appointed to that particular commission is going through immense public scrutiny because people believe he shouldn't be there because he is corrupt. So these are the kind of issues we have. But Rachel, I like that when we talk about something as huge as corruption, that we go to the genesis. And this is something I learned in policy. You cannot talk about corruption without going to the roots. When you look at the colonial authorities, when they came, they empowered a few who served their interests. Not only that, they extracted, they abused, but they also looted. Now, what happened? Post-independence, African governments inherited those systems and in part exploited them. Now, unfortunately for us, our leaders have been unable to see the light in terms of coming up with a new order that works for the interests of the people instead of serving just a few who get richer and richer and the poor get poorer and poorer. How do we break away from this cycle of poverty? Perhaps something we'll definitely get to at the end of the show. But of course, we have to go back to Kenya because this is a huge part of this conversation today. And Michael has a way of breaking it down for us right there, right?
Yeah, let's hear from Michael because he's talking about Michael.
I know you want.
Michael, hey, Michael, you're.
Oh, hello, Rachel and Fatu. Corruption in Kenya is rampant. Before you crucify me, Rachel, it isn't just a Kenya problem, by the way. It's a global one, but in Kenya, it hits you directly. Transparency International ranks Kenya 32 out of a score of 100. The lower your score, the more corrupt you are. Got it? Kenya itself acknowledges the problem. If you talk to 4 people in Nairobi, at least one of them will tell you they have been asked to pay a bribe at some point. The police are the worst. If you interact with them, there's a very high chance that you will have to pay some money. But here's what I'd like you to know. Corruption isn't simply paying some money guilt-free. If you have to pay bribes. To access the judiciary, it means access to justice depends on your ability to pay someone else. What then happens to those who cannot pay? And this also affects access to jobs, safety, and yes, the justice system. That means only the wealthy can afford to live decent lives. And that is not normal, is it?
Indeed, it's not normal. And, Kenya is just a good example of that. And it's really, Fatu, talking about corruption is a really difficult thing. It's a dangerous thing, and even you mentioned it's something to do with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. In Kenya, we also have this case where, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission cannot prosecute these things. So they take it to the Director of Public Prosecutions. But the problem is when this Director of Public Prosecutions does not have the necessity, to prosecute
or
these
the
cases. They don't have independence. And if this person, for example, if this high-profile police is then again taken to the police, can you imagine what that means? Then there's no justice there, really.
It's crazy. And the irony of accessing public services, you have to pay extra, even after paying the actual fees. Like these are public health services, for example, judiciary. These are public services that are supposed to be readily available for you. But for us, the Gambia, the irony is that the corruption case was worse in terms of numbers during Jammeh's era. Now they seem to have improved. Doesn't mean that it's still not there, because our ranking right now in regards to the Corruption Perception Index is at 38. But the irony there is that when I was much younger, I saw or heard over the news how Jammeh was sacking public officials due to mismanagement of public funds and abuse of office. But nowadays, that's not readily available, right? It's not really happening. Not to say that at least it has not happened in one or two instances, but it is to say that it is clearly ingrained, and local research has gone on to prove that when people want to access services, it is clearly a hurdle, and that is so unfair. But we're still with Kenya because we clearly have some proper examples.
It's always fun in games when people talk about corruptions in jokes until it costs you your life. Now, I want to tell our audience the story about Evelyn, who was 8 months pregnant at the time and was going, through these challenges accessing healthcare. But the most shocking thing happened to her, and this made her rethink about government hospital services. Please have a look at this.
2 weeks ago, tulikuwa hapo na kasichana kadogo kako almost 17 years. Kalipoteza mtoto juu madaktari waligoma. Mama alikuwa ameumwa, akatoka hapa kwenda huko, wamefunga, wakaenda utiende pia ni hosi ya government. Huko pia walipata wamefunga. So hiyo kutembea, kitambo warudi waende hosi ya private, mtoto alikuwa shachoka akakufa. Mimi kama mama mjamzito nasikia uchungu, na pia nilihuzunika juu hiyo, na pia ilifanya nikakata kauli sitaenda hosi ya government kuzaa. Saa yangu ikifika nitatafuta tu pesa yangu, at least niende hosi ya private nijipate kwa mkono ya daktari.
I think people need to understand that the absence of corruption, or the corruption is not really present in the situation of giving and taking. But if you, for example, have a healthcare service or a healthcare facility that's been built and there's no medication, public health officials are not adequately enumerated, it's not accessible and affordable for the people, then there's clearly a big problem. And most times it's either a case of corruption or just, people not trying to just step up to their responsibility as public officials.
Absolutely. And the thing with sometimes even like state officials themselves, they have no power to control this. Because I remember there was a time with the Ministry of Health in Kenya, for example, during COVID times, the minister, Fatu, the minister himself, he sat there, he was talking to the members of the press, he looked at that building over there and said, this building has its fair share of criminals. He said that.
You don't mean it.
Imagine, he said that. And he said that he also is trying to tackle corruption in his ministry. And even in South Africa, we have relevant examples where, the Tembisa, scandal was really big, that it really, really frustrated people.
I mean, South Africa is even a special case. And this is something that even their president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has been speaking to lately. The corruption that is happening, especially at the local government councils, which is very critical because governance or development development happens at the local government. So if the councils are corrupt or busy fighting one another, then there's clearly a big hassle. Now he's telling them that they should not continue stealing public funds. They should take that money and put it to where it belongs.
Exactly.
And South Africans themselves have been coming out, talking about this infrastructural projects that are incomplete, social welfare services that people cannot access to. Is very, very complicated. When you look at the Gambia, and especially because we're still talking about health, I mean, we have been talking about a national health insurance scheme for years now. I mean, we even have a whole policy for this. I have not seen it. I do not know if it's still in effect.
So
I doubt it is.
So it's like a ghost.
Yeah, I mean, so
happening.
these are the issues. But when you even look at the bigger picture, making that effective in a country like this or in a region like this where services are not digitized, we do not have a system that is very much easy to follow. It's very complicated. And the question is, are people willing to pay? Because it is not free to have a national health insurance, right? But even when they pay, how can they access it? Look at, we have a situation where someone has to be referred to a private clinic despite the fact that there is the public health service.
They go
that is extortion.
Yeah, and they actually depend on governments, but the governments are failing them. But
that's the problem. But you said, it's not only Evelyn. We also have more stories in this regard in the street debate there in Kenya, and Edith is going to take that away.
Tell me what happened when you went to actually the highest hospital in this country, which is a public hospital, to give birth.
When I turned 19, I gave birth to Scott. That was March 2019. And I went to Kenyatta Hospital, but I was neglected. Yeah, so they left me, and when they came back, they found the baby's head already out, but it was too late. So my baby didn't cry, and he developed cerebral palsy in the process. And now I have to take care of a disabled child that way.
Yeah. It's...
I don't even know how to react to that video,
huge.
to be honest, because imagine having to take care of a child who is now differently abled for the rest of his life. This is what is going to, this. I don't even have the words because it's so bad. And this is not the first instance that we're hearing about, children, not just children, but rather even mothers being neglected at the hospital. It happens everywhere.
A lot of money could have been saved there. If only there was someone who was really taking care of that particular situation, because now she has to take care of a disabled child. And do you know how much that costs alone? And when we talk about negligence in healthcare, I think it's something we really need to look at. I mean, of course, in the Gambia, we also had cases of the acute kidney injury where, more than a dozen kids died due to negligence in the public health service. And what happens to them afterwards. These are things that we should really be looking at and be very cautious as a people, because it is indeed playing with the lives of people.
Actual people. And also in Kenya as well, we have the situations where if you talk to someone, they will tell you that they will never go to a government hospital to give birth because they really don't trust the services that are being offered over there. They prefer going to a private one.
Yeah, the irony there is the highest referral is usually at the public health service, right? But if the people cannot trust them with their lives, then clearly there is a big problem. And I think nations should take it further in terms of not just realizing that, okay, the problem has happened, but where do you move on next? So it's not all about coming up with the policies and saying that we have a roadmap, but what do you do afterwards, You can watch the full debate on our YouTube. It's already there. And of course, we always have the snippets on our socials, on Instagram and TikTok. So keep following us, because I think we also have to look at the other part of the debate there as people broaden this conversation even more.
Yeah, but it's not just us who are shocked by, all these things about negligence, about corruption, especially in the health ministry. But there's also other people in this debate that are really, really upset.
What are the other sectors or areas where Kenyans might be getting shortchanged?
Health, of course, is one of the sectors that is greatly affected by low service delivery. But there has also been complaints about education, especially higher education.
Now, when you said education, I heard a choir behind me. Okay, tell me.
Parents are being asked to pay for the national examination. And every financial year, we have a budget, disbursement of money. Where is that money going? Where is it doing?
Okay.
I believe most Kenyan politicians speak from a point of privilege. Most of them have the funds to take their kids to Ivy League universities abroad, but they never take time to realize that the common mananchi in Kenya can't even afford breakfast or a three-course meal, three meal within. That's very sad. So I say to Kenyan politicians, shame on you. If you're embezzling funds in Kenya, shame on you.
It is indeed a shame.
It's a shame.
Because when you look at sub-Saharan Africa, for example, the region that you and I are from, this is the region that is considered the poorest in the whole wide world. Meanwhile, it harbors 30% of the world's mineral resources.
Everything that we have is in this continent.
It's right there,
you know?
especially in sub-Saharan Africa. But the reason we live, over 60% of the population live below the poverty line is because of lack of access to basic services like education, healthcare. And this is the problem. And when you look at the Corruption Perception Index, it is showing you that over 90% of countries in this region score below 50, with 100 being the highest.
I think, Fatu, you mentioned your rank from the Gambia. You know, the rank of Kenya is 32. 32.
But look, Kenya is bigger than the Gambia.
Yeah,
the Gambia is just less than 3 million people,
but
and we are 38.
To be honest, that really just makes me crush. Because sometimes I look at the potential, of the African continent. Can you imagine if we did not have corruption?
Yeah.
How many jobs would be created?
With all the vast resources, and you wonder what is happening to the 10% that are doing well on the continent, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. I was looking through Botswana because I'm working on something for Botswana on the next coming roast, and I realized that this country is not usually in the news too often.
I actually don't hear about Botswana. What's happening over there?
And then you wonder what's happening in Botswana. But they're really doing so well for themselves.
I think it's the quiet ones.
Those people are utilizing their resources. They are using their resources to better their lives of their people, and every penny is being accounted for. They have stringent measures that curb corruption, and where it's been found, they make sure that consequences are being enforced. So, countries should learn from such countries that we have as our neighbors that are in the same region. Why are we not talking so much about it? One would say, yes, we should talk about the good things, which we, of course, do on the 77% as well. But if someone is dying in Kenya, I think that clearly is something we also cannot ignore. But you see, people are now taking it into their own hands. And I saw this issue of the Kaluma Boy as well. Kaluma Boy?
Kaluma Boy. Kaluma
it's trending.
Boy. Yeah, this was really trending at the time, especially in Kenya, and the concept of Kaluma Boy started, this kid is from central Kenya, right? And his father actually got a stroke. And so, when somebody gets a stroke, sometimes they have difficulties, taking care of themselves. And so Kaluma Boy
kind of paralyzed.
Yes, and even as you can see in the clip, Kaluma Boy decided to take care of his father, And while he decided to do that, he decided to also take his phone and document the crisis. And here you can even see how emotional he is. But then Kenyans noticed this, and they came together. They decided they're going to help Kaluma Boy. And, yes, they decided they're going to help him in terms of even financing, his father's healthcare.
This is interesting.
So
Rachel.
this is an example of civil engagement, because sometimes governments tend to fail you. And how can you take part in this?
People take it into their own hands. And I saw someone say, as part of this Kaluma Boy story, I saw a comment where someone was saying, when Kenyans come together, they are more efficient than the government. And I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to. There is power in the collective. Exactly. Imagine collective rage being put into tangible acts of transformation. That in itself is explosive. And I think these are conversations that we can have among ourselves. I mean, the leaders are there. The government, of course, needs to report to the people. But at the end of the day, we can also do so much. And Michael always has a way of giving us a more realistic solution. You know what I mean, Rachel?
Exactly. And this reforms, sometimes they're not even realistic. Not everyone can have a Kaluma Boy story. But Michael can tell us how we can all manage to bring civil engagement and collectivity.
Oh, look, it's you two again. At this rate, I should probably have grey hair and a long beard, since you keep coming to me for sage advice. But let's talk about Susu. You might know it as Chamas, Njangi, or Adashi. This is a traditional community-based savings system where trust is very important. Here's how it works. Imagine 4 of us form a group. In the first month, we all contribute the same amount of money into a pool or a kitty. In the first month, the full amount comes to me. In the second month, we all contribute again. And then the full amount goes to Rachel. Then the next person gets it, and then the next one, till everybody has had their turn. Simple, right? So why do this? Susu is especially useful in communities where access to banks is limited or where people need a lump sum of money for something important. It can help someone to start a business, pay school fees, or handle an emergency. The members do not earn a profit on their contributions. Instead, the benefit is access to a larger amount of money at once and the shared support of the group. Susu or chamas can be a lifeline for vulnerable people.
Oh, have you heard of the term before?
So here's the thing, right? I didn't know it exists in West Africa because in Kenya, when I was growing up, I remember like we had this chamas, chama things where women came together to collect money together for investments. But I didn't know it's in...
It's huge, my girl. I mean, of course, when you look at the genesis, right, most of these women have never been to school in most cases back in the day. So there's also the issue of financial inclusion. So they do not have easy access to banking systems. You can imagine like it's such a tedious process, the paperwork. And, it's better to come together as a group, put your money together, and then at the end of the day, someone receives the whole amount and the cycle continues until everyone gets it. But for me, it's a very emotional story because these are women that usually are also facing double neglect. And it's not always the case, but you will realize that there is a household where the man is not coming up in terms of, fulfilling their financial responsibility as well. And these women always find a solution. Most of them are very entrepreneurial. They're the ones going to the farm. They're the ones selling in the markets. And they have some sort of money all the time. So it's either sometimes the husbands financially abuse them by using their power to still get this money from them. And then at the end of the day, the family struggles. These women would rather starve than have their kids struggle because they cannot afford school fees or buy textbooks or because they cannot afford medical bills. So they would rather come together as a group and support one another. As a kid, I grew up watching my mom, talk to some of these women in our house because she served as a collector in most cases. And it's usually a woman that the community trusts so much. And they know that their money will definitely be there at the end of the day. They would come sometimes to explain how it's important for them to collect the money in the next phase because they need to buy new clothes for their kids on Eid.
Yeah, and sometimes, this collectives, for example, this chama, and Kenya also used to have this name called Harambe, which means that people come together, collect money, contribute for healthcare, for education. Sometimes even when your road is not working in the village, people came together, to make sure that the roads are working. And this is such an empowering thing.
Do you see what's happening there in the case of the double neglect I was talking about? There's neglect in the home and there's neglect in the part of the government.
Exactly.
Where services are not just easily accessible and people are forced to go beyond just the usual, to just make life easier for their people. And this is really extreme. Savings is very important. We all have to do it. But when people really have to deprive themselves the basic needs just to be able to survive, I think we really need to look at it clearly. And which is why we need to talk going forward. What's been working? What can help in your own understanding, even as just human beings? What can we do?
Yeah, what can we do? And as well, we have to also reimagine and start rethinking who is to blame in all of this. You can always blame the government sometimes, but sometimes there's situations where African governments tend to fail civilians.
Yeah.
So coming together, having GoFundMes, we also have WhatsApp groups sometimes where people come together and even contribute to some of these things.
That is in very easier ways as well. But like we mentioned in the beginning, it is also a very much a systematic issue.
Exactly.
The issue of corruption is endemic, especially when you look at the African context. And so for us, I think it's important. In the beginning, South Africa was already talking about reform at the local government councils. The Gambia is talking about the Anti-Corruption Commission. Kenya has the Anti-Corruption Commission, but it's not only about building these commissions and talking about the reforms. Are we open and transparent in terms of giving the public the opportunity to ask and be given,
as well.
Giving media the access to be able to do their work and hold politicians to account. Civil society organizations need to be able to operate, to do what they're supposed to do. Someone needs to serve as a watchdog in case something goes wrong. Because at the end of the day, there should be checks and balances. Exactly. And who's going to do that? But before we even get there, it's important that we have the structures that are working for the people. And in cases where they are not working, reforms are being taken place. Reforms are taking place. Now it's about time to also take a step back and reevaluate those reforms and see really how we can develop a new outlook for the African populace. And I think it's very important for young leaders to also put that into account. And look around us, the countries that are doing so well for themselves. When I like to always reference Senegal because they're closest to us in the Gambia.
No, guys. But really like Senegal.
I mean, they're the closest, right? And we can already see them doing so much good for themselves. I mean, not to say they don't have their own problems, but things like how they've been able to digitize their systems, and it's working effectively for them. Look at what countries like Botswana is doing.
Exactly.
Look at what Seychelles is doing. Countries like Botswana, Seychelles.
I read Rwanda is actually
too.
coming so high up. They're like 40-something now.
They're extremely there. So look around them and learn from them. What are they doing? At the end of the day, this is about people and their lives. You do not have to wait for us to come and ask for what should be given. It belongs to us. You should be able to give it. Don't feel like it's yours. You can't give it away. Give it to the people, because at the end of the day, they put you in office and they should be able to also say, no, we've had enough of you. But we hope that gets easy.
I hope it's easy, because sometimes, you never know.
You never know.
You never know.
But we've come to the end of it as usual. We like to say that you should always keep an eye on us on our social media platforms, on YouTube, as we like to publish on YouTube first. So make sure follow us there and subscribe. On TikTok, we are there. On Instagram, let us continue the conversation, guys.
Talk to us. Where are you? If you're a screen near you, if you have a screen near you, please go there and like, share, subscribe. We're always here to talk to you.
Till we come your way again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, by the way, we've got some Jeez.